Soon, the live stream. You know, one of these days, we got to talk about opening music. Our voiceover is still kind of good.
Oh man, I was worried a little bit. I'm glad it's working though. Sorry for the technical difficulty, guys.
On the upside, you know, it's really us because there was a technical difficulty for those who have been on Mirrorless Mondays before, and it has been a while, so that's why we wanted to wait an extra 3 minutes to go live. Couldn't have been a technical difficulty at all. No,
essentially.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Nope.
That's life though. But thank you guys for your patience. The problem was I was connected to the internet twice with my LAN cable and my Wi-Fi, so problem solved. So we're ready to rock. Thank you guys for joining the travel and landscape photography class that we have hosted by Adorama. We have Jason Etzel here, a fellow Sony imaging specialist, just as I am, Robbie Bulilan. And we're excited to be with you guys again. It's great, Mirrorless Monday. It is hot. You'll probably see a little glow on my end. Yeah, it's not too bad. And I think this is going to be a great class that we're going to have today. I can't wait to answer some questions. There's been an overflowing amount of questions that we have. So we're excited to get to it. Awesome. Jason, how are you?
We're doing good. I, too, am checking the smartwatch as both of our heart rates are getting back to an acceptable rate. So we want to thank everyone for registering, for spending some time with us on this only balmy 11 billion degree day. I want to thank everyone who also pre-submitted your questions. We're going to try our best to answer each and every one of them with the appropriate slides where they help. But we also encourage everyone who did not submit any questions. Feel free to put that in the chat. We're going to try to get in there as well to have some additional ones. If you have any questions about like gear, shooting in general, this is very much an open forum. So everyone, be encouraged to, if you're just switched into Sony, thinking of switching to Sony, just starting travel photography, just getting into landscape, this is your safe space. And it's nice to see that we have people joining us from all over the Google Maps, if you will.
Absolutely.
Yes. So with that, and because we owe you guys an extra 3 minutes of your life, roll that beautiful footage, Robbie. Let's go to it.
Yeah. The footage is me, and it's live. No,
yeah.
but some other things as well, though. You're welcome to ask any questions. Jason's going to try to tag me real quick as soon as any questions do arrive. I went through the presentation with him, so he should know if any of the questions coming up are going to be answered. And we also have a bunch of other Sony imaging specialists here with us, Hector Pariuelos, and we have a few others. I haven't seen them in chat yet, but they're going to be helping us answer any questions.
They're here. They are here.
Hey guys.
Yeah, for those who are also Sony imaging specialists, your questions can wait.
Yes.
Everyone else is getting top priority today.
Yeah. And I am going to be on vacation. Literally, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow. So this class was great for me to kind of go over my mind process, and I can't wait to hear some of your questions. That way I could dot my I's, cross my T's, and make sure that I'm ready to go.
And part of this deck was created with me and Robbie just talking the past few days of, what are you going to bring, man? And some of the debates that you all have, and maybe have, and some of them I could tell you right now, only about 9 separate questions to like, I can only take X amount of pounds. My bag is only so big. Which gear do I bring? We're going to get all into that today.
Exactly. And I do have the camera connected as well. So if we do have any burning questions in terms of how to access, I have the A7R5 here, and I can go through any of the menu settings as well. But yeah, so
We forgot to see what was going to be the focus subject for the R5. Good one there, Robbie. You got me off guard on that one.
there you go. Surprise.
Well done.
All right. So other than that, guys, let's get started, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. So we're going to get started here with travel and landscape photography. My name is Robbie Bulilan, and this is kind of like this photograph actually is one of my recent trips that I had. I got a chance to go to Nevada and just went on a road trip. So me and my girlfriend just kind of went sightseeing. I had a rental car and just saw some sights, and yeah, I've done a lot of traveling in my days. I got a cool opportunity when I was in college to go to a study abroad in Cuba. And so we were able to get some photographs then. And I've been photographing or traveling in general. I used to be in the Navy back in 2006. I left at 2012 or 2014. 2014. And so that's really where I really got into photography. And I had the A300 was one of my first cameras. So I went from the A mount to E mount. And 10 years ago, I was in Philippines with an A7 and a 35 2.8 Zeiss. So I'm excited to go back again tomorrow. It's been 10 years. But yeah, so that's kind of what we're going to be going over. And obviously with photography and traveling, we are going to get some nice food to eat. So there's some of that right there. One of my favorites, I guess, because it was delicious. But yeah, so I'm going to go through the overview right now. And so one of the things, the few things that we're going to be overviewing is resources, prepping for the trip, the gear, being in the moment, I think is a big one. And then we're going to cover landscapes and some tips and tricks that we'll sprinkle in there just to kind of get you guys prepared, be more, active and get ready to get those photographs out there. All right. So some of the few resources here are some of our ambassadors that we have. If you guys are looking to get inspired, we have a few from Autumn Schrock, Scott Kranz, Lizzie Gadd, Tiffany Wynn, who are amazing photographers, and they're going to be able to set you up and get inspired, see what kind of photographs they're capable of, and maybe think about some of the things that you can think about in your photographs when you're traveling as well, because traveling really comes down to experience. Next is the Alpha Universe. I do have the QR code there real quick if you want to screen capture that or maybe go to it later. But the Alpha Universe is a really great resource to see which other ambassadors or people who've submitted their photographs will have. They also share the gear that they use and everything else. So, and if you want to check if your camera is currently in its most up-to-date firmware, there's a resource there as well through the Alpha Universe website. If you guys haven't yet utilized any of the apps, if you guys are using the A7 III or any of the older-ish cameras, maybe the second generation, the A7 III's, the Imaging Edge Mobile is going to be the app where you could send the photographs to you, even some videos as well if they're proxies, and it's a great way to get your content out as soon as possible. Creators app is another great one that we're using recently, and there's a few changes in that I'll go over in the end. And we have our Imaging Edge desktop, which we could use on our desktop, essentially. So if you wanted to use that as a kind of a remote shooter or even edit your RAW files, if you don't want to pay for any subscription, you are able to edit your RAWs. So don't be afraid to shoot RAWs in that sense. Cool. So let's go forward with prepping for the trip. So the first thing about the trip, right, is kind of understanding yourself and what's going to be going on, right? I've done personal road trips from coast to coast before, so I was able to bring whatever I wanted and also take as much time as I wanted. So you have to kind of consider that versus you're going to get on a plane and you're only allowed a certain amount of luggage, right? So it really comes down to how much gear are you going to be bringing along with you? Also, what kind of personal items are you going to be bringing? Are you going to bring like 2 sets of clothes so you could have more room for gear? That way you could just wash it every other night and have something to wear the next day. Then that's one way to get more gear. So definitely consider what kind of gear you're going to be bringing. And this is kind of the thought process that I've had in terms of what I'll be bringing for my upcoming trip that I'm going to be having. I'm not sure if you guys watch any of the content out there on YouTube, but EDC or everyday carry is something I've really gotten into, where you kind of just carry it every day, right? So some of the few things that I like to do, especially when I'm traveling, is I have my crossover bag, and that's essentially what's going to have a lot of the main key stuff. And having medicine and everything else is going to be one of the main importances that you're going to have, right? So consider your essentials. The ZV-1 series, the RX100 series could definitely fit in that camera very easily. So you could also include that in your your everyday carry, right? And I personally like to carry a little tiny bag, like a little Ziploc bag of like quick medicine if anyone has a headache or if I have a headache. And if you're traveling overseas, definitely pack Imodium in case you drink bad water. And then I also keep, little tiny accessories where it's an external battery pack, a flashlight, that little stand over here in the on the middle right there, next to that flashlight, right next to the bag is actually a $3 cell phone stand that I like to use when I'm traveling, and so I could just set my phone on a tray and just like watch any media. So definitely check out, I don't know if you have a Daiso in your area, but that's where I picked it up for like $3. But those are the key stuff that I typically like to bring with me for the everyday carry bag. There are a lot more other accessories too if you could pack them. Obviously would suggest extra battery and an external battery pack. We kind of went over that. Filters are going to be really important with anything that's glass or water. That way you could kind of shoot through the water and take out a lot of the glare. Having a remote is also really good if you're doing landscape photography, and a rain bag is also pretty important if you're planning to be outside, if you're doing any wildlife photography as well during your travels. Having those little cleaning cloths, very important as well. As you saw in my EDC bag, right next to the bear actually is where it hangs off of the bag, and I actually keep my little cleaner cloth over there, so it kind of just cleans either my glasses or my lenses whenever, and they kind of just hang out, so they're pretty easy to access. The blower is really important to clean out your sensor if you're swapping out lenses, especially if you're out traveling, so that way you could reduce the amount of spots in your photograph, right? I also like to carry a organizer kit for my bags, and I also bring a larger medical kit essentially. So if I get any cuts, scrapes, or anything else, I have a larger bag that has anything just in case, worst case scenario. It never hurts to have, right? And on the previous one here as well, they do make prepared, like pre-prepared kits, so you could have it pretty much in the same size as a wallet, and that's pretty easy to you don't have to really go out too far to set yourself up for that in case anything wrong happens. All right, so the next thing I would probably pack with me, especially if you're able to bring a book bag, your personal equipment, is your laptop, right? A laptop's good, especially if you plan to do landscapes pretty heavily and you want more control. And so Photoshop, you need access to that. And so that's typically why I would bring a laptop, or just in general kind of communication or larger entertainment instead of just watching from your phone. And I also like having a backup solution like a solid state hard drive. That's going to be one of the biggest things too, because if you bring a hard disk drive that are fairly cheap, they were more like $40 instead of $100, they are a physical disk that spins. So any bang or ding on it could actually jeopardize your file data. So definitely consider a SSD hard drive if you are backing anything up. And then you also, I personally like to have a media organizer, so anything that can hold or house your SD cards. So if you have multiple and they don't just go in a tiny little bag where you could lose them, that's also something that horrifies me, right? So definitely make sure that you are mindful of that. Now, one of the cool things that I like is the wireless shooting grip, the GP VPT2 Bluetooth. I know it's a little bit long in the tooth in terms of its name, but it's actually incredibly useful as it is very portable and you have control. Once you connect it to your camera, you can control it through the grip essentially, and it works exactly like a remote. So if you wanted to take a family photo, you could actually just disconnect it and use it to take a photograph of any groups or anything like that. And if you have an Xperia phone, you could actually connect it to your Xperia phone through the camera app. So it works essentially like a Sony camera in that sense. So I thought that was very neat. Cool. The other thing too is full-size tripods or travel tripods. Peak Design makes some really great lightweight tripods, as well as a few others now, especially in today's market. There's a lot of great tripods out there that are light, sturdy, and very portable. So having that, really, if you could take your time to take photographs, that's going to be a very important thing to utilize. And if you have your second camera, you could also shoot everything else going around you over here. But if you're running it on through S&Q or any of those landscape time lapses or anything like that, or long exposure photographs, then having a tripod is going to be really, really important. Cool. So in addition to preparation, I like to do some recon as well, right? Some people have traveled to the places that you're looking to go. So in this case, I've always wanted to take a trip to Nova Scotia in Canada, right? So in terms of the resources that I go through, I typically like to ask friends or family, anyone that's over there in the great place of Canada. And YouTube is another great place where you could find some quick tips about what's the most common places to go to, right? You're not going to know really the low key, but maybe there are some spots there on YouTube that they actually cover. And then social media as well. If you look at the tag and actually search that hashtag, you might find some really cool spots. But Google Maps is a really great avenue for it because you can also see the ratings, the locations. I personally love coffee, so I will search roasters, coffee roasters in the area, and then check that. So if you're ever looking for a good cup of coffee, those guys who roast their own beans typically have a little bit more care instead of the second wave Starbucks kind of stuff. If you want a more experiential thing, definitely check out coffee roasters. There's some really great ones in the local area. Lastly, there's apps, right? So there's a lot of other cool apps that you could use to find great locations. All Trails for hiking. So they typically will show you kind of spots that are very popular, and normally they come with a great view. So that's another great one for any of your landscape photography, right? Recreation.gov for me and Dirt, they're kind of similar, where you find camping locations, and normally those come with a really great spot as well, where you could be by a river or anything else like that, or you'll be close to hiking locations that you could work with All Trails. And lastly, Rever, which is normally for motorcyclists, but if you use Rever, you could actually find some really great routes, and it tells you how long it takes, and some of them are kind of created by other people in that community. So if you're just looking for a really nice drive, then I highly suggest Rever. Well, cool. Jason, do you have any questions?
Oh, we've got plenty of questions that are in here, as well as some presets. And once again, thank you everyone for sending in this stuff early. You put a lot out there that are answers to some questions already that people have been looking for, because when it comes to travel photography, especially, it's one of those, what gear are we going to bring? But then it's also like, where am I going? What am I doing?
Yeah.
So some of those essentials in like your everyday case, having the apps, that covers a good chunk of some of the questions there. I too should start put together my little dream list of where I want to go.
Yeah, same.
I should put some more things in the Great White North in there. In some cases, when it comes to some of these generics. We're going to put some of these questions out there because it might be relevant to a lot of people who haven't put them in. We are going to be going a little bit more specific into gear at one point. But I just wanted to say, because I've already filtered out about a dozen questions of people in some cases, if you update your gear, will your photography get better? In some instances, very much yes. It depends.
Sometimes it helps. Yeah, incredibly.
I mean, Robbie and I are socially acceptable drug dealers. We know what we are when we put these cameras in your hands. But we're also ones who will be like, hey, there's some gear we have where it's just once you hone your craft, you follow some of these tips that Robbie is putting out there, you can still do a lot with the gear you have. I have some people here noting they have NEX models. That was even before our A6000 series. We have some people who are even asking here, with Mirrorless, will you see benefits? We do some other classes on Mirrorless Monday that actually will show things like Mirrorless brings your back of your lens element closer to your sensor. It improves image quality, but we would probably advise you first, maximize your capabilities as a photographer. At one point, the gear will take you further, but the gear is never just that quick fix coming through. This one could be a nice little segue for you as part of your prep, but we did have a good question that came in here from Ken. What do you do when the weather is not cooperating and you're constrained by a remote location with no cell service, no GPS? How would you work in that predicament? Because that is sort of an all-around for both travel, landscape, and I guess photography in general.
I would duck and dive. No, I'm kidding. But like, not just that. It really depends on if the photograph is calling, right? So if you are in a really cool location, if it's really remote, then I guess it would be fine. But your safety is probably going to be the most important thing first and foremost, right? So make sure you're in a good location. Make sure that you have somewhere that you could kind of stay. That should be your priority. But if you have nothing else you could do, let's say you're in a car, a tuk-tuk, or anything like that, then pull out the camera and start shooting. The cameras are typically pretty weather sealed, especially if you have the right gear. So the A7S3 is something that I used with the 7200G Master during a triathlon. It rained 3 times, and I totally forgot to bring a rain cloth or a rain bag over my camera gear, and it was still shooting. I don't advise it because after the 3rd time it rained, it started giving me an error saying the lens is not recognized, but it was still autofocusing and it was still shooting. So that was kind of a thing that kind of solidified that the camera is incredibly capable. I took out the battery, I took out the SD card, and I let it sit for 3 days. And after 3 days, it was still working as if I just bought the camera. So I would definitely trust the weather sealing pretty well, especially coming from the DSLR days when I had the A300. It would mist and then it would start going wonky. So make sure you're good, make sure you're safe, and then find time to shoot, because sometimes those harsh weather conditions can really create some really great photographs.
That's true. And in some ways, I'd also like to say again, if you're in an issue where you're worried about your survival, our advice is probably not the first thing you want to fall back on. But we can tell you how to basically make some photo time out of it. You touched on apps before, and we have a question that's from both a mixture of what we have from Jamel and Maria. Using apps, what are your favorite photo editing tools to use while travel and in landscape?
Gotcha. So my personal favorite is InShot, where I edit a lot of my videos. So if you're going to my social media, which is right over here, you'll see some of the videos that I edit through InShot. You could pay one price and then you have it for the rest of for the life of it. So that has been pretty sweet for you have music or any other editing softwares in there. And then I also like to use Adobe Lightroom Mobile, since you could edit the raw files that you can transfer. So those are the 2 main apps that I pretty much use. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and part of their follow-up there, and you kind of were already on it, that's something that makes it very easy to do some editing in the field, get it up on social media really quick. I have seen Robbie work wonders with InShot, where we have finished an event for Adorama. I'm literally packing up the car and my phone's going off with alerts where he's already got videos and still images edited.
Yeah, I'm pretty
it's part of
lazy,
what he
so
does.
being lazy is really advantageous when you want things out sooner than later.
Well, let's not call it lazy. You work in a very efficient manner in this
There you
case.
go.
So it's
Either
something
or.
that's yeah, it's an either or in this case.
Yeah.
But we can go in a little bit more now to some of the stuff there as far
Yep,
as your
let's
gear.
continue.
And just so you know, everyone, some of these are we're gonna interrupt with some questions as they come in, but part of the gear here, even if you're like, hey, we're going into travel, we're going to landscape, all this applies to all photography. We're hearing some of the questions we're seeing here as far as, hey, is there anything in here about birding? We'll find a way to make it something about birding in here. Don't you worry about it.
Yep, absolutely. And we got some great comments here from Kevin, who also uses CapCut. And yeah, crop out the little thing in the bottom right or pay for it. Then it also takes out the little watermark, and you're pretty much good to go. There's a lot of great features out there, but InShot, CapCut, both great programs as well. And Nancy had a question about how weather protective is for the A6400. I think honestly it's better than the 6100. So you're gonna do fine in the misty days, but I would never just willingly be out in the rain to go shoot and be like, I'm fine. You should always be like, well, I should consider my investment and protect it. So yeah, but the 6400,
it's a protected investment.
yeah, but if you have the 6400, you definitely want to you're pretty okay with that, because it does have weather sealing more so than the A6100. All right, so we're gonna go towards with gear. All right, so Lisa asked for the apps. I just saw that, so I'm gonna go ahead and type in InShot. Oh, thank you, Jason, you got it. All
but
right,
now
so
I zoned out. What was the other one?
InShot, Lightroom Mobile,
Yeah,
and
that's
yeah, and CapCut was shouted out from
yeah, we've got
Kevin
that
over
there
there.
from Kevin. And yes, Hellbent, congratulations on falling victim to our wonderful Try This 51 too. But I think you have, as they say, no regrets.
Exactly. So if you guys are wondering what's in my bag, it's a little hectic, but this is essentially what I'm planning for my trip, right? I'm still very wonky in terms of what I should bring, because 10 years ago I had the A7 original and the 35-28 Zeiss, so I'm actually thinking about taking the A7C2 instead, and then the 24 and 40 millimeter f2.5G, the compact G series, and I'm showing that in the gear as well. But a few key things to bring also is a Grail water filter, or not just that, but a water filter in general, in case you guys are going to anywhere with sketchy water. You can filter it pretty well, and that one would probably save you from taking that Imodium. But here you could see the list here. I'd like to keep the Sony Link Buds with me, so I'll pop it in and I'll be able to still hear everything around me and take photographs, so I could kind of put the atmosphere there. The NAR box, unfortunately, they are discontinued, so you might be able to find them used, but you kind of have to be a little bit more savvy in case something does go wrong with it, and it has gone wrong for me. So there's definitely newer alternatives for the NAR box, where you can store and just have that external hard drive as well. But yeah, cool. So
let's leave that slide up there for a second, because we actually do have a few relevant questions, but
sure,
we don't need my face for this one, because I think everyone should look at you, say your wonky process there.
We got it. We got both of us in here.
Oh, all right. So now we got both on there for the wonky process. In some cases, we have some questions here as well. And I wanted to leave up the contents here because Larry and a few others, you have some great questions here about, would there be a size benefit of a full frame versus APS-C while traveling? And in this case, you can see how sometimes everything kind of adds up. But that's also why you look at Robbie's two main lenses he has in there, the 24-50 2.8G and the 16-25 2.8G from Sony. They're very lightweight, they're very compact, and on an A7 IV, they don't really have that big of a footprint. But essentially, he has got a 16-50 2.8 zoom range for versatility coming through. And the 20 millimeter he's got on there, excellent if he wants to go a little bit lighter and with a prime. So in some cases, it is a matter of just fitting what's going in there, because you look at his bag right here. Sometimes it's more than just extra batteries, extra lenses. somewhere there's a vape in there. I'm sure that fits into the bag as well. But we've had a few questions here of, just taking one lens, would it be a prime or a zoom? I think what Robbie has in his bag right here is kind of the perfect example. Robbie will be taking this trip. He's not going to be focusing on wildlife. He doesn't need extreme telephoto capabilities, but he is giving himself the ability to have a compact prime in there for low light, as well as a moderate zoom. So in some cases with interiors, he could still move around. He's got a little bit of play. There is no true right or wrong, but we can get into this also at the end. But Robbie put this together because, as he wrote down there earlier, he knows where he's going. He has done the planning. If he catches wildlife and it's a couple 100 yards away, he'll have to live with that. But his bag is going to be infinitely lighter. He's bringing the stuff he needs with him.
Right, exactly. So for me, I've learned that I typically am at 24 or 50 millimeters. And so being able to have the 24 to 50 in one lens has been incredibly easy, because when I had the compact G Masters, I would have to wait. Hold on, everybody, I got to swap out the lenses, or kind of just commit to one lens per day. So that's the reason why I personally like that. And long lenses, it's if I'm planning to go. So this is a trip with my family and everything else. So I kind of I want to be mindful of their time and my time, since there's going to be pretty limited amount. So I don't want to carry that extra 4 pounds and extra baggage to bring with me. So I kind of just forfeited the thought of the long lenses. But great questions, guys. Cool. So this is the list that I have. And moving forward, the other things that were kind of burning in my head were which camera am I gonna bring with me, right? So in that sense, this is pretty much what it was toss up with, right? I love the A7S III because it's low light. That is my favorite camera still to this day. And so I love having the mechanical shutter. You could also do 4K 120. 12 megapixels is typically perfectly fine, even when I print 13 by 19, right? But now we have all these compact cameras that are full frame, that we have the second iteration of the A7C II. And if you took a photo side by side between the A7 IV and the A7C II, essentially you're going to get the same picture because they're very closely related, especially the A7CR and the A7R5. So if I had only the 24 to 50 millimeter lens with the A7CR, I could crop significantly and get really nice and tight without losing that much detail, right? And the best thing about these newer cameras like the A7C II, the A7CR, and the A6700 is that they have the AI autofocusing chip. So even if a subject is wearing a helmet, it's just so much smarter in terms of making sure things are in focus. It's not to say that the A7S III is any bad at autofocusing. It's actually incredible because it's using that same algorithmic autofocusing technology, but the AI autofocusing chip just has a lot more in terms of managing on its own. But I'm using the A7 IV, which doesn't have the AI autofocusing chip, and it's able to track incredibly fast, regardless, even if I'm moving forward or back, doesn't matter. And the ZV-1 Mark II will typically stay in my EDC bag, right? So the ZV-1 Mark II has a different lens than the ZV-1 original. So the ZV-1 Mark II has a 16 to 50 millimeter equivalent. So I actually can go and get pretty wide angle shots and get fairly long shots as well, or standard, if you will. And so that's kind of why I would consider the ZV-1 Mark II.
All right, and just for some quick questions that were popping up in the chat there. Barry, we actually, both Robbie and I are known for sometimes shooting too wide. It's just something that we do. And the shot that was referenced earlier, I believe, by Nancy in regards to the bullet shot from this weekend, I have to double check on the EXIF data, but I believe that was actually shot on a 24 millimeter. So in some cases, like Robbie was noting, there's the ability and resolution to crop on some of these bodies, especially for things like the A7CR there, because he can bring on that 2450 that we were discussing. A crop on that will sacrifice the 61 megapixels down to 26, but he just basically got a 75 millimeter. If you're using a 24 to 70, you basically just created a 105, while still maintaining a compact size. So there's many ways to work wide angle to also create some telephoto, which was part of, I think, Kevin's question on here as well. And also to Mark, sometimes you just know what you're going to go out and shoot. And we have been, Robbie and I are those guys. They will see us with a 600 G Master with a teleconverter attached to an A6000 because we
Yep,
can. Uh, Not the
absolutely.
way they were designed for, but there are plenty of ways to create focal length. But it's also one of those, you'll know the situation when you're going out. Hey, I might be coming across some wildlife. I'll have this just with. And usually that is a popular zoom, like a 70 to 300. And if you have the APS-C, our 70 to 350 is excellent for that. Very
Oh yeah.
lightweight, still getting you incredible focal length. So whether it be an APS-C body or a full frame, there are ways that you can have this going. And Robbie basically said it there perfectly. He has that ZV-1 Mark II in his everyday case. It's that quick thing where out of nowhere, he's like, oh, I had this just to
Yep.
cover a shot of something that arises. That could be the same with a lens in your bag, possibly an APS-C body that you brought just for the telephoto needs. So
Yep.
all
And
kinds of options.
honestly, Nancy put a good point that I didn't bring up the A6700 because I see it so similarly to the A7C2 and the A7CR. It is an APS-C sensor, but at a $1,400 price point for the body only, and you're getting a lot of the modern features going on with it today, right? We've put a lot of features in here, like the AI autofocusing chip. We put all the new features, the new menu system, and everything else, and we slapped that into the 6700. You could actually get 4K 120 in it, even if you needed to. So it's actually incredibly capable, very cost efficient, and really weather sealed. Not to mention that it does have the FZ100 battery, so your battery life goes a lot longer. I could just shoot with one FZ100 battery pretty much throughout the whole day and still have plenty more left over during a trip. So I took that with me recently to. I don't know if you guys have heard of auto camping, but there is a way to rent out a airstream in a communal area, and so I pretty much just carried that with me all day, and it was really easy to just use too, just like what I would experience with the A7C2 and the A7CR. So definitely consider the 6700 as well. Now on top of the gear, we have a lot to consider as well, especially the lenses, right? So the lenses that I was considering for this trip was essentially the 24, the trio over there, the compact G series is the 24 millimeter f2.8, the 40 millimeter f2.5. Excuse me, those are all saying f2.8, but they're actually f2.5s, and the 50 millimeter f2.5 as well. And so having that on a camera, I could actually fit that in my crossover bag, but having the convenience of the 24 to 50 and then having that extreme wide angle case for the 16 to 25 is incredible as well. So it's been a very tough call between the two lenses. So the 2070 millimeter f4, I actually get that whole range and I don't have to really swap out lenses. The drawback is having the f4, but I've shot a whole day with that and you could raise your ISOs now pretty well and you could still get some decent image quality even at low lights. So that's definitely one of the main things that I would consider. And obviously, if you can bring it, the 24 to 70 millimeter f2.8 G Master is going to be the one that kind of answers everything. You don't have to swap out lenses. It does not get really wide angles, so maybe bring along the 16 to 25 millimeter f2.8 G lens as well, so you get that ultra wide angle lens. And you could really fit a lot, especially when you're traveling. If you're doing any architectural photographs, that's going to be really great to have with you, especially is the 16-25 millimeter f2.8 G. Lastly, the APS-C lenses. For me, not a lot of people talk about it enough. The 20 millimeter f2.8, you could see how small it is, right? I'll put that on my A7 IV. I'll put it on the A7C2. It's still 14 megapixels when it crops into APS-C, and it looks like a toy camera essentially. But the thing is, I have a lot of the new features that I have in the cameras, the autofocusing and everything else, and I have some really great image quality. So that's the lens that I bring with me when I need to be extremely portable, very low key, and that's one of my favorite my crop lenses over here, because literally the palm of my hand, let's see, that's essentially the size, right? It's basically nothing. The others, if you have an APS-C camera like the 6700, is the 35 millimeter f1.8. I like having a standard lens, so 50 millimeters equivalent is really good to have, especially at f1.8. You have a lot more light, so low light capability is going to be good. And then the 10 to 20 is my ultra wide option, so I could get kind of more of the general area. Now, if you don't want to bring any cameras or lenses, there is a way to bridge the gap, and that is the RX100 Mark VII or the RX10 Mark IV, right? The RX100 Mark VII actually goes from 24 millimeters to 200 millimeters, so you have a really long focal length. You still have a larger sensor than a typical cell phone with a 1-inch sensor, so you are going to get better low light than you would with a typical cell phone image, right? And it does have a stack sensor just like the RX10 Mark IV. I don't know if you guys have seen any of the content with Taylor Swift, but someone was using a RX10 Mark IV to get 8K footage using the RX10 Mark IV. Because it can do 24 frames per second, they were able to just shoot continuously for a really long time. And that's how they got, because the RX10 Mark IV is 20 megapixels. So they were able to get 8K footage for it, and they just synced up the audio with external microphone, and then it was pretty much good to go. But if you don't want to bring any lenses or anything else like that, especially if you're traveling, if you're going to do any wildlife, this is going to be a really good answer, especially if that's going to be the only thing you want to bring. So you could really lighten your camera bag.
It's one of those that both of those cameras, the RX100 and the RX10, as Robbie just said, they are perfect they're going to fit in our bag and take care of so much. The RX10 IV is a non-interchangeable body. So that means any arena or stadium, sometimes there'll be no professional photography allowed. Lens doesn't come off. That's usually the guideline they use. And that's why all the Taylor Swift shots that people were getting, whether it be video footage or even shooting from all the way back, you had a 600 millimeter f4 that can fire at 24 frames per second. Whether it be Taylor Swift concerts, I have plenty of people who've taken it to professional football and baseball games. You can get some stunning images out of that. And it is a 1-inch sensor, which is the same as the RX100 Mark VII, which also gives you that ideal range. And for some of the people here asking the questions, there was one here, I believe it came in from Nassim. Can I take some better pictures in my iPhone 15? Note that some of these high-end cell phones out there, the ones that are saying specifically like, hey, we're great at images, you look at some of the Sony Xperias, we use the same sensor as the RX100 Mark VII. But you are getting the lenses on here. Instead of the tapping where you're at a wide, a middle, and an extreme telephoto, this is giving you the full spectrum coming through. And we did have some generic questions about just, hey, better use on here as far as cell phones. Keep in mind, all cell phones are mirrorless cameras. So we'll go into more towards the end, but anyone who was like, hey, how do I meter and things of that nature, we will go over that at the end with our cameras, and it will apply to the cell phone questions as well.
Cool. All right, so let's move forward. So aside from having the gear checked off, we do want to stay in the moment, right? So when you are traveling, now that we have all the prep pretty much done, you do want to keep in mind a few things when you are traveling, and that is to keep your valuables close, because that's a very large investment. So unless you have insurance, traveling insurance, you could have a temporary insurance for your gear when you're traveling, so that's definitely something to consider. But you do want to reduce the risk of having that loss, right? And make sure you respect the local cultures as well. So when I was in Japan, there was a sign here essentially if you wanted to drink the water from the temple, then you have to use the scooper and pour it into your hand. And I feel like if you didn't do your research or didn't see the sign, then sometimes you might be offending someone. So be very mindful if you are going to other cultures, and really look into it, because sometimes we just don't know. But do your best to respect other local cultures, especially so we want to represent ourselves from our home country as, a good group of people, right? Don't get anyone angry, so we could continue going to those places. And ultimately, have a good time, enjoy yourself. If you're on vacation, you should be having a good time, right? I hope that you are taking the time off, and this is supposed to be a time of relaxing or having fun, so definitely take advantage of it in that case, right? And then the other things that you could really do when you are traveling is taking pictures of cityscapes, right? New York is right in our backyard, so I get the lucky opportunity to be able to shoot whenever I feel like. This was actually one of the photo walks we had with Adorama. So discover the area around you. Look at the architecture, because there could be a lot of history in it as well when it comes down to it, especially with how long some of these buildings have been around. If you look up the building and kind of see their history, it actually could enlighten you or maybe improve the experience because you're learning more about that history. So do your research when you go traveling. But this is the 14 millimeter lens that I was using, the G Master. It's nice and portable. So to answer Barry's question, I think it was Barry who was wondering about the 12 to 24 f2.8 G Master versus 16-25. It depends if you need to go 12 millimeters, right? So this is a little bit wider than 16 and the 14 millimeter that I have here, but the 12 to 24, it comes down to how much weight you want to carry with you. So if you have room to have the 12 to 24, by all means, bring it with you, because it will give you a lot of unique different perspectives as well. Because with a 12 millimeter or a 14 millimeter, I wouldn't have gotten the World Trade Center in the shot all the way from where the cloud breaks. So anything longer, I probably would have just gotten, I forget what that building is called, so I didn't do enough research, or I'm just bad in memory.
Nah, your memory is still
Anyone in
good,
chat?
Yeah, some people will know it in the chat if they remember from that walk. One thing to note is in that shot, because Robbie just did mention with the 14, which we put up there, but usually people get a little concerned with a 14 millimeter. We'll get that TP effect. You can see this is pretty much straight out of camera, because I was there with him when doing this, and there's not much correction needed here for the monument. And to the question that's there in the chat, the 12 to 24 G Master is amazing. Weight-wise, you might want to rethink it on travel, though. The 14 is a very good substitute to bring with you as well, and you will gain a stop. Excellent for architecture and extreme wide angle. You can't go wrong with either, but they are physically two different lenses.
Yeah, I remember an old lens, I think was 15 millimeters f 3.5, and it was the size of my head, but that was during the film days. And the fact that the 14 millimeter f 1.8 is even more light available to it is incredible. You're getting a lot of clarity, and take the distortions as an advantage. And if you really need it to be straight for architecture, then we're gonna have to do it in post, unfortunately, but that's kind of the name of the game. Cool. So moving forward, we're going to be talking about street and or candid. So you really, for me, I like to prepare the shot and be aware of my surroundings. I saw that there was a cute kitten in this photograph while we were kind of shopping around the markets in Cuba, and I saw the kitten, and then the girl came up to it, and it just pretty much just worked out really well, and I had my camera up and I took the shot. So sometimes having that interaction I thought was really cute, and because who doesn't like kittens, you know, pretty hard. And like being able to react quickly was the one main thing, right? When it comes to street, I'm pretty shy. I don't think there's a lot of photographers that are just like using a flash on top and just taking pictures in the street. I personally am, I like to avoid conflict. So I'll kind of wait for a really cool, maybe composition, and then maybe if something happens in that area, if there's time for me to take, then I'll just hang out and take some pictures there as well. There you go. Lay loves kittens. Who doesn't?
Everyone loves a good kitten. And this question also from Cliff. When is it okay to share or post some of the shots that you've taken on the street where people's faces are visible?
Oh, great question, because this is one of those things, right? So in public, generally, it's free game because you're in a public space. The only time really where you will face legal issues is mainly when you're making money out of it, and if you don't have the license to be in the area, in like if it's owned by a property, if you don't have the authorization to post those pictures. But it comes down to if you're making money out of it, and whether you're in a public space. So at a park or anything like that, you're typically good to go. Just be respectful first and foremost. Cool. Thanks, Jason. All right. So I'm gonna move forwards with nightscapes. I love hanging out and seeing the stars. I've never knew how to take a picture of the Milky Way. This is one of those moments, but I did like the composition here, right? So if you're working with stars, you want to consider the 300 or the 150 degree rule if you're a little bit more, let's see, you don't want star trails to show, right? So the 150 rule, so essentially the 300 rule or the 150 rule is you divide 300 by the focal length of your lens, right? So if you're shooting with a 20 millimeter lens, whatever the 300 millimeter or 300 is, so 300 divided by, I have a calculator. I don't know if that makes me nerdy, but 300 divided by 20, I have 15 seconds here. So if I didn't want to show kind of star trails in photographs and just keep them as crisp stars, then I want to be able to shoot at for 15 seconds long if you use the 300 rule, and then half that to make sure you definitely don't see star trailing. Once you zoom at 100, you might see it, but a lot of people don't. So definitely consider that as well. And you know, if you brought your tripod during the trip, do your best to use it. Find some opportunities, and I really hope that nightscapes or landscapes would be the one for you. And then finding the Milky Way, I didn't know this, but depending on the season or where you are geographically, the Milky Way won't show even if you have a really clean night sky. For the North Americas, I believe it's around spring to fall that we'll see the Milky Way, but you also have to consider the light pollution and everything else. But if you could catch the Milky Way, there's some great apps like Photo Pills is a good one. It also actually has the 300 rule in there to automatically calculate. And then Star Trails, I think that's the app to kind of see the constellations and learn more about it. But yeah.
Yeah, and some of those will actually, using GPS, will like show you like this is what the sky is going to look like at this time. Of which somewhat segue to Chensley Adams, because I think it's kind of appropriate with this here. Want to know about the use of sky in your images, and I'll defer to Robbie here in a moment. But with this nightscape up right here, obviously we want to shoot the sky and show what's there, but it's also the foreground and the landscapes that are making this image possible. We just finished 4th of July, a lot of great fireworks shots out there. Some of the best ones are obviously they're heavily sky shots to show the fireworks, but also what's shaping it, what's giving some perception, what's showing us how big that firework explosion was. And in this case, we need that mountain structure there dead center to show us how vast and open that sky was here in this nightscape.
Absolutely. All right, so
well, you're supposed to give some feedback here too, Robbie.
Well,
you can move along, but Chensley had a good question.
Well, foreground, yeah, because we do have a few good features on the A7R5, right, where it's to do focus stacking, so you can do that. So preparing the shot is going to be pretty important, and so yeah, stack and really incorporate a lot of different things into a photograph. A landscape would be great, but if you have something in the foreground to kind of also balance the photograph, to maybe frame it, help frame it and everything else, that's going to be a great option for you as well. But yeah, thank you, Bear, for answering that question. I hope Suzanne over there is taken care of. Great question, by the way. Okay, so the next thing I do want to focus on here is forward low light, right? So a lot of things about low light photography. I like shooting in low light. If the A7S III is one of my favorites, that's definitely the case. So for me, you don't want to be afraid to push your ISOs, right? You need to get the shutter speeds that you need. So if you're afraid to go higher than ISO 400, you're going to be at like 1/8 of a second in your shutter, and that's going to be the biggest drawback, right? You can't get the shot anymore. So cameras like the A7S, or I used the original A7S in the past, or the original A7, to get those shots, to get those shutter speeds, you kind of have to do that. So definitely find light sources. We had the overhead lamps in this situation. And then this is actually one of the things where having new technology actually helps, right? Because 10 years ago, and the last time I went on this same trip to the Philippines, I had the A7, right? And I shot at ISO 6400 for this shot. There was a nice little single glow of light, and you could actually see here, if I go full frame, full screen on the presentation here, that the A7 was incredibly grainy when I compared it to the A7C2 or the A7 IV, even cropped. The top right picture is using the 20 millimeter f2.8 crop lens that I talked about, the extremely pocketable pancake lens, right? And the A7 IV, you could see how small the drummer is in that photograph in the bottom right. And so ISO 6400, the noises are completely different, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's a new sensor, it's using new technology, and there's also the new processing units that we have in our cameras, right? So we're using the Exmor RS, and then we're also having backside illuminated sensors. So if you are considering on maybe upgrading and you want to push ISOs, upgrading, there's a lot of benefits to that if you are considering, right? But yeah, so I'm excited for my trip in this case because I'm going to be bringing the A7C2 and then the 40 millimeter 2.5, which I think is very close to the 35 millimeter 2.8 Zeiss. And lastly, but not least, we do have food photography. If you're out traveling, I highly suggest trying the local food, right? But things to consider is your f-stop, right? If you're too wide open, depending on your angle that you're shooting, if you're shooting right at the plate, it's circular, right? And it's presented to you as such. So if you're shooting at an angle just like this photograph over here, you're going to get a very shallow depth of field. So if you do want to focus on a singular thing, like the pecans over here in the photograph, but if you wanted to get more in the frame, you kind of want to bring your camera maybe higher or lower because that focal plane is also going to shift. So if you want to get more of the plate, let's say the dish is maybe like over here, right? It's curved up like this. If I bring my camera and change the focal plane, then I could get more things in focus by angling up more. So that's definitely something to consider if you want to keep that f-stop that you want to stay at. Also, you know, be kind of courteous about the others around you if you're eating with others because everyone else is just looking at you take photographs and they're just waiting to eat. And so don't take too long. I like to take maybe 15 seconds or 1 minute to take the photographs and maybe a few photographs here and there and be quick about it. And then that'll also make you, it'll be a good practice to be a faster photographer. Get the angles that you have set up, your safety photographs. And then if you have anything you want to test around, then you do that. But yeah, food photography is pretty fun too because it's delicious. Cool. Now we're into landscapes, which is the other section of the whole class, right? The real question is, though, when you're taking landscapes, is how much time do you have, right? So if you're doing, if you're on vacation and you're with others, are they fellow photographers? You know, are they able to be patient with you if you really want to set up that shot? But if you come across a cool place and you're all sightseeing, maybe you don't have as much time because they want to get to the next section real quick, and everyone, you don't want to run too much time, like, or use too much time of that vacation because you're also using that time, everyone else's time as well, right? So if you have time for a large format camera, then I think you have some good friends or fellow photographers with you because it does take a long time to prep up, right? But if you were being quick, so I kind of set it up in this way where we don't have a lot of time. So if you are doing things quickly, I would highly consider where the light is, right? Availability, where are they? How's the clouds? Because we don't really have control of the light in this situation. And where is the light coming from? In this case, it was pretty much high noon, so the clouds were going, or the shadows were very harsh, but I like the way it was lit. I love the symmetry in this photograph. That's why I took it. But we were also just walking to a secondary location. And I have a little typo there about being lazies, but that's me being in the moment, right? But in that time, you know, you don't want to really take up too much time of everyone else, as I was kind of saying before. So push your ISOs if you need to. So even though there's a lot of light, I just push the ISO so I could have the faster shutter speed, take a quick picture. That way it's stored in my memory. Sometimes the picture comes out great regardless. And yeah. So if you do have time, definitely take the time to use the tripod, use the dang thing, right? And consider your accessories. This one, I didn't need to have a ND filter, but if it was during a really bright day, then I could have also slowed down the shutter. But I used my tripod here. I had maybe 1/6 of a second to show the motion of the water, and I didn't want to lose too much of that motion because I like the way the waves looked in this situation. So it kind of worked well. This was during my road trip to the West Coast, and this was the first time ever going to that side of America, so it was pretty cool. But you really need to fix it in pre, right? So make sure all the settings are set and have your filters set up, and really consider the accessories that you have on there, right? Another thing that I wish I could tell myself maybe 2011, right? So something I could wish I told myself 13 years ago is that there's a thing called lens diffraction, right? So understanding lens diffraction is pretty important, because my thought process in this photograph was that if I'm at f/22, that means this picture is going to be sharp, right? And that was not the case, right? There's a thing called lens diffraction, and if the aperture is actually too small, you actually lose detail. So when I was looking back at the shot, I was looking back at the cars and everything else under, and I realized that they're actually not crisp, sharp. And this was the time where I actually had a full frame camera. I had the A-mount Sony A900 and the Pro 16-35 2.8 Zeiss lens, but I shot it at f/22, and I was like, how come it didn't give me a sharp shot? And looking at that photograph now, it turns out that there's a sweet spot. So typically, even wide open, all the G Master lenses do amazingly. They're incredibly sharp, but you can eke out a little bit more clarity in there if you stop down like to f/5.6 or f/2.8, even if you're using a f/1.4 lens. But if you go to f/3.5, you could definitely get a lot more detail in that sense, right? So definitely mind your f-stop, and hopefully this is reaching out to you guys the same way that I wish I learned sooner. So if you guys are watching this, f/22 isn't better. The only time that f/22 could actually work is if you need to be quick about it, right? You need to have the foreground and the background in focus. That's the time where you give the f-stop a purpose. So if you go to f/22, then you're getting the foreground and the background in focus, and then you could do it in one shot and continue moving forward. But if you have the time, then maybe we should get into a little bit of the tips and tricks, which is this, right? So some of the newer cameras that we have is the A7R5, the A7C2, and a lot of the newer cameras actually have a thing called focus bracketing. So if I show you guys here real quick, if I turn on focus bracketing, and you could find that in your drive mode, and we go all the way down here to past it, focus bracketing, you can see that we could shoot and choose how much. So what we do initially is to focus on a subject first, and then when I hit the shutter, it'll actually take pictures going all the way to the end. So I'm going to do that right now. But before I do that, I wanted to show that we could also change wide to narrow. So it'll only move the focusing very like small or a lot further to the back, right? So I'm using a 135mm f1.8 lens here, and if I take the picture, it's gonna take about 79 pictures to get the chopper. So this one will be really beneficial. So instead of using f/22, we could stay at f5.6, and then we could combine all these photographs later, right? So what's gonna happen is that we could go to Photoshop or any other program, and we could also work with the RAWs, and that's going to be the biggest thing with focus bracketing, is that we could work with the RAWs, we could get the detail that we want to recover, and now you could see that the camera is pretty much there set at chopper. So if I was to combine this, I could get both the crab that holds a pen, that's the thing that I liked about it, but the crab and chopper over there, we can get them both in focus and post, and then we're pretty much ready to rock. So I could have max clarity and also get everything there. So if you're doing macro shots, landscapes, this is going to be one of the big things that you could take advantage of as well. Cool. Jason, any questions?
Question as we're going through on that, and a shout out to Crab Hands there. But from Barry, if you would go through the difference here between what we just showed with focus bracketing, going against pixel shift, which is also available on the A7R series.
Right. So pixel shift essentially is turning your A7R5 into a huge megapixel camera. So instead of having foreground and background and focus, in this sense, your in-body image stabilization is now shifting one and getting the red, green, blue, shifting again, getting all the red, green, and blue, shifting again, getting all the red, green, and blue, shifting again, getting all the red, green, and blue. What it happens later is it combines them all, and instead of having 61 megapixels, you're going to get over 200 megapixels, 250, and I think it's 200 megapixels with the A1. So if you're trying to get as much detail as you can, I highly suggest that it is for still life, less so landscapes, because the leaves will move, so there's a lot of variance, so you might see some artifacts in that sense. But if you are doing still life and you are documenting it, say for fine art, and you wanted to get the max quality, then using pixel shift would be really beneficial, and that's where the Imaging Edge desktop comes in handy, because you could utilize that to combine that and get you your 250 megapixel shot. So if that's what's happening, you do have to set it on a tripod, just like focus bracketing. But yeah, pixel shift is also a pretty incredible feature. So thank you for bringing that up. Cool. Anything else?
We've got all kinds of questions, but you're rolling. Go with it.
All right, cool. We're almost done with the slides, so let's keep moving forward. Cool. So other than focus bracketing, this is a thing that I've been enjoying, and I feel like not enough people are talking about it, is creative look, right? So for your images, there's a lot less editing that comes with it, right? So when I have family photos, I used to edit all of them in Lightroom like I was doing an event, and that took me 4 hours, and my parents would be like, where are the photographs from, whatever. I'm always trying to convince them not to use their cameras because I brought mine, but there's like 8 people getting the same shot, and we're actually standing there for way longer because we have to get the same shot for everyone else's cell phone. So having like your editing be reduced down significantly, that's really nice. And so creative look is actually kind of like a filter for your images, right? It's not affecting the raw files, so you still have full control if you want to go back to it later and take more time with the photograph. But you know, there's some really great photographs done by Genie Photo over here. If you guys want to capture that QR code, he actually goes through some of the recipes that he makes, right? So if we go to our camera right now, we hit function, and we go over here to creative look, then we can actually see the different types of filters that go along with the photograph. So this would be standard. Let me expose it properly here and get out of focus bracketing and stay with chopper. But here we could see standard, PT, there's a lot, neutral, vivid 2, FL. Actually, I never knew, because on the website it just says FL and doesn't tell us what it is, but we just found out because of the ZV-E10 Mark II and all the promotions, it's actually film. That's the kind of effect that it has. We have instant, and I think this is high key, so it looks very soft and gentle in that sense. Then we have black and white and sepia. So what you'll see here is that we have a 1, 2, 3, and these are ones where we could customize even further, right? So if I hit right, I could control the contrast, the highlights, the shadows, the fade, the saturation. So like maybe I don't like that much fade, then I'll do that. Saturation, sharpness range, clarity. There's a lot more we can control in that sense. And if we forget what we did and we don't like what recipe we actually made, we could actually just hit the trash can and reset all the parameters for that sense. Right, so I'm very excited because one of the cool things that Ginny has made here was that he made some recipes to show us, and they look great right out of the camera. So I'm very looking forward to you guys, if you do any work with the creative look, definitely give it a shot, because in the older iterations, it was creative style in the Gen 2, so A7 IIIs and around those kind of cameras, the A7R4s, creative style didn't have much control, maybe 3 sets of control in it. But now the creative look has been amazing for me, because a lot of the photographs that aren't edited, a lot of the photographs in here aren't edited in my presentation, and they're all just pretty much either film or instant. But personally, I like instant a lot, and I'll kind of tweak how much fade it has. But yeah. And here, lastly, we have the setting your minimum and maximums when we're being lazy, or being efficient rather, as Jason so kindly put it. So in your camera, if you're setting it ISO auto, you could actually set what your minimum and maximum ISOs are and your shutter speed. So there's certain situations in the camera where you, if it's on auto, it will essentially just be ISO. Hold on, let me turn on ISO over here. If we go to ISO auto, depending on the camera, we could actually choose the minimum and maximum so it doesn't go above or beyond. So ISO is very subjective with what you're comfortable with. With the A7S III, I shoot at 51,200, no problem, because it's probably going to go on social media or a screen where no one would really notice. But if you don't feel comfortable pushing your ISOs that high, you could set it down to 12,800 to make sure that the camera will try its best to stay at that suggested ISO, right? And lastly, the shutter speed. So if we go to the exposure setting, we could set our ISO auto, right? So we're in manual exposure, so we would have to go to something like aperture priority or program, and then go to ISO auto, and then we could choose maybe not 30 seconds, but personally, at its lowest, it'll probably be 1/60th of a second for anything auto. But I personally like, for candids, 1/250th or 1/125th of a second. That way, if the camera's auto, you'll see that the shutter speed is at 1/250th as a priority, and then it'll work on the ISO later. That way, it's gonna get the shot, right? So we could practically have a very nice and easy way to get your shots at by setting your minimum and maximums for your ISO auto. So I highly suggest taking a look at that if you are being lazy or efficient, right? Next is the Creators app, and this one is gonna be a really nice one with the newer features, especially if you have the newer cameras, right? The Creators app, in comparison to the Imaging Edge mobile, is that it could send raw files. So when we were talking about editing in camera or like from your phone, if you want to work from your phone, then you can actually work with a raw file because you could send that with the Creators app. The newer cameras have newer hardware and better, stronger Wi-Fi signals, so we're able to stay connected. So you could actually connect to your camera even while it's off. So even if my camera is in my camera bag and I'm sitting in a train or something, then I could still transfer the files because I could connect to it even though it's off, right? So I could get straight to editing photographs or uploading the photographs to, let's say, Google Photos, and then sending it to my family after an event, or editing a video. If you guys have been to my Instagram, I will send all the videos to my phone, because you could send full-size videos, not just the proxies. And while I'm having dinner, I'll send all the videos, and by the time after dinner, I'm editing the video and posting it essentially right away. So the Creators app has been really essential for me for editing and my workflow, when I personally don't like to edit in Premiere or Final Cut, because it tends to be, it takes more time for me, and then I start overthinking. So I'd rather just get it out immediately, and those editing programs work enough. So Creators app, definitely great if you guys can get it. And if you guys are on the A7S III, if you updated your firmware, you can get Creators app now, so it's incredible. So definitely check that out. But yeah, Jason, do we have any questions?
We got plenty of questions in there.
And then we have
plenty of them coming through.
Creative look Jason here too.
You know, you were playing with the creative look. It makes the sunburn look so much better in the black and white. How could you help and not play with it? Yes, we're going for the very noir look to it. I just put through in the chat also where everyone can find the Creators app on there. As Robbie just went through in detail, plenty of wonderful things there that you can do. And with some of the newer cameras, more features like touch focus and things can be enabled as well. We got a few questions that were coming into here. And also to your question, Mark, that just came up in the chat, a lot of times you will see our cameras do get firmware updates, and sometimes people are like, hey, what really happened? You look at the firmware, and sometimes it is additional support that will be going with it. Some of the older cameras, probably less likely, but we have been expanding that list, and it's one of those that Robbie and I have found, if Sony could find a way to do it, they will go
I
and
would.
do that to maximize
Yeah.
everything with it. So we've got some more of the questions that were coming through in here. And unfortunately, Lisa, yeah, the A6000 was actually designed to work more with the Play Memories app way
Yeah.
back when, even before the Imaging Edge mobile. There still might be some ways where connections can be made, but probably not the full functionality of the app.
Yeah.
So we'll see
It
how
kind of
that's
comes
going to work.
down. It comes down to hardware too, because it depends on a lot of like connectivity, and so the newer cameras have dual Wi-Fi bands essentially, so 5 GHz and 2.4 GHz. And unfortunately, the older cameras had a different hardware that just didn't exist in the present or in the past. So sometimes we can't add it on to newer firmwares like the A6000 and being able to have access to the Creators app. So it might not be something that's possible for some of the older cameras and the older generations, but I was happy to see it on the A7S III, and Sony is working very diligently to update firmwares to make it accessible.
Yep, and thank you, Bear, for knowing it on there. At least what you could do is Imaging Edge Mobile is still there, and it could support the A6000 as well.
Yep.
Of which we have some questions here, and believe it or not, we have some that are in the A6000 series. We have from SB, they have an A6000. Some of the things that we've mentioned on there, we've already kind of gone through when you're asking about like, getting some settings. But you did ask, would it be beneficial to rent long lenses for natural, animal, or wildlife photography? As a whole, Robbie and I a lot of times believe in the try before you buy, because it's one to see the results and to obtain it, but it's also like, what was this to put it in your camera bag? What was it to travel? How did it feel in your hand? Sometimes that could be achieved going into a store like Adorama, where all of our lenses are on display, put it on the body, see how it feels. The proof is always in the pudding when you see the images that'll be on the end there.
Yep. So Nancy, the A64 is the Imaging Edge mobile. So the A6700 is the one with the latest technology. So that's the one that's going to have the Creators app on it.
Mm-hmm. And let us see what else we have here. There's a bunch of them in here, which we're also going to put in towards the end. I believe you have a few more slides to go, so we'll hammer that out, and then we'll hammer out these additional 47 questions.
Sounds good. We'll try to get to all of them, right?
We'll
so
try.
Lastly, I do just have one more slide, and because it is Prime Day and tomorrow as well, we actually have a Prime Week deal going on. And on top of that, the first time that we could actually announce this over the internet is that we have the trade-in, trade-up promotion. Normally, this is just a promotion that's happening in stores, but if you are looking to trade in your gear to upgrade, the A6700 is one of those cameras. We just added the A7C II as well. So if you were considering and trading in your camera, whatever your camera gets quoted for, or your lens or anything else like that, if you're buying that camera, like the A7C II, they're going to give you an additional discount on it, right? So the A7C II gets $250 off on top of whatever your gear gets quoted for. So that'll be an incredible benefit if you are looking to trade in your camera and upgrade, so you can reduce and save some costs. And this is not just a single promotion, but you could actually stack it on top of the instant rebates that are happening during Prime Day. Right? It's 2 days.
Prime days, yeah.
But we got Prime Week. Our deals are going to be going on for the rest of the week. So I didn't plan this for the live stream, but I'm really happy to see that that we have some really great deals. Right now is probably the max you could save if you are looking to upgrade. So if you are looking to trade in, trade up, you can get a quote by going to that QR code or going to the use section of Adorama's website, and then they'll reach out to you, and then you could communicate with them. This trade-in program is going to be happening until the end of September, but the Prime Day deals will probably not last as long as the end of September. So if you are definitely considering a camera right now, definitely check it out and take advantage of it. And also, I really wanted to thank Adorama for letting us be here, be able to live stream and hang out with everyone here today. And I really appreciate everyone taking the time to take your photographs, to join us during this live stream with us. But yeah, thank you so much. And again, we're probably going to go through some of the questions that we have if you signed up through Eventbrite. you were able to submit some questions, so we're probably going to get through some of those. And we pretty much hit the end of our presentation a little bit over time, as we normally do here with Mirrorless Mondays. But that's how we work.
It is our staple to make sure that we run over in time. And I want to thank everyone for the questions in the chat as well. So feel free to put some more in there, because we'll be going some of these real quick. Vic, just wanted to note your question on the hyperfocal distance. There are many ways to go about it, but what Robbie Shu on focus bracketing in some cases might be one of the easier ways than going through the math of it, if you will. But we might put that down as part of a future Mirrorless Monday discussion as well. It's just, that'll be another 90 minutes on us right about that right now. We do have some questions now stemming up from the A6500, Robbie. This one coming in from Lawrence. And this applies to, I think, a lot of people who might be wondering, terminology in the focus settings on an A6500 in relation to other manufacturers' focus settings in the terminology. If you would like to give some generics on that for our focusing terms.
So like if we were to translate different languages, right? So let's see. We have our autofocusing. The two main things is focusing mode. So if you're from Canon, it's pretty much the same with Nikon. But if you're from Canon, this is AI autofocus single, AFS. We have autofocus auto, which switches between autofocus single and continuous. But this is where AI servo would be for Canon, right? So this will continuously autofocus even though the subject is moving around. So even if I move my camera around, it's focusing on chopper to the best of its ability here. But yeah, so that would be the autofocusing modes. The other is focusing area. I don't think they really change anything, but wide will focus on the whole frame, so whatever's closest. And then we have zones where we could use our joystick here to kind of just prioritize what we want to focus. And center, we can't move it at all. So unless I tap something on the screen, then it'll update. But spot, you could move it around. Expand spot will move the spot and also consider the corners as well a little bit more. Like a little bit more. Just eke it in there, and then there you go. And then tracking is probably the main thing. If anyone is getting into photography and have never messed with autofocusing mode or autofocusing area, I would 90% go to autofocus continuous. I've probably never left it unless I needed to go manual and take a still life. And then I would probably live in tracking center fix. That way I could focus on the subject first and then recompose. So that way I could choose what my subject is and then I could kind of work it into the photograph together. So yeah, that's pretty much, I ran it through, I think.
Yeah, there's always going to be the fun things that could be played on there. We have some questions here. We're going to kind of lump some together. So I want you to know, like, yeah, we have one of the more popular ones for at the end. I was going to save it, but this kind of translates into basically what is three distinct different questions. Because we have a lot of people here who are looking for some suggestions, whether it be the ideal lens to be taking for landscapes, to be taking for birding, which body and lens combination to start with in some cases. And probably one of our more popular questions here lumped together, how do you make money doing all of this? Which
those are
Robbie
all
and I are always
classes.
trying to figure that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say in some cases, usually money is no object when it is not ours. However, both Robbie and I have used things like the Sony program that he just offered, that he had the slides up for, where there's lenses that have sometimes we have upgraded from, we're not using it as much. We let that become an asset. It's something that's going to help us buy the new toys that we want. As Robbie just noted, he's going on a trip. Some of those lenses, he was like, I need these because I'm taking them on this trip. They become a worthwhile. And that's where in some cases, you, as we mentioned earlier, you start to pack the stuff you know you're going to need. If it's birding, in many cases, people ask what's the most popular birding lens. It's probably our 200 to 600G.
Yep.
Solid lens across the board, internal barrel, quick throw to get 400 millimeters worth of distance. It's priced under $2,000. That being said, some people might say like, hey, what about the 400 2.8 or the 600 f4? Those cost more than $2,000.
Yeah. And now we have the 300 2.8, so it's more portable. It's more affordable. It's $6,000, but it's half the cost of the 600 and 400G Masters. And you can use teleconverters.
Oh, yeah, yes, exactly. It makes it a perfect thing to play with. And also, it's one of those, it's a good question. You look at all the Mirrorless Monday stuff that we have out there. Robbie and I are self-admitted lensophiles. We do have a preference of zooms over primes. They're like Pokemon. We got to catch them all. And we have some situations where they will all play. So in some cases, as much as we can give some great suggestions, for some of the people here saying they were starting out, overall, I think you can't go wrong with a camera like an A7 IV with a 24-105. That is a perfect one to use across the board. It gives you a constant f4, decent ranges. If you don't want to go with a prime and you're doing landscape, also take a look at our 20-70, which is also an f4, but you're getting it 10% wider, which is very ideal for the landscapes to be used.
Yeah, it really comes down to budget, to be honest, right? So anyone around like $1,500, right? You have a lot of great options. One of the things that I love about Sony is that we have so many cameras from from back then that we've released that are still extremely capable. So the A7 III right now is, I think, $1,500 with the kit lens. So if you're looking for a full frame camera that has dual memory card slots, so if you're planning to do events, weddings, or anything like that, a lot of people have done that have used the A7 III as their professional camera, and now it is at extremely large cost savings during the Prime week. So definitely check that out if you're looking for pro events. And then, or if you want to grow into that, the A6700 is if you're a little bit more low key and need a single memory card slot. And as your budget goes up, it comes down to what you're capable of in terms of flexibility. But the A7 IV or anything with the newer generation stuff, the A7 IV, the A6700s, that's a $1,400 camera. The ZVE10 Mark II is $1,100, I think, right now. And so that one is extremely capable and has the latest features and a lot of the modern conveniences that we have, the Creators app and everything else. So I would say that there's a big plus towards those cameras over the A7 III. But if you are starting to look to make money, definitely consider the A7 III as well. But that's where the balance really comes to, like, because you don't want to go over your budget as much as we would love to. But, being really, really smart with your money, there's a lot of good options right now. And the best thing is that we have over 75 lenses available. And the 20mm f2.8 came out maybe during the NEX days, right? And I still use it to this day. I really would love an update of more pancake lenses. And that's why I love the pancake G lenses, the 40-2.5, the 50-2.5, and 24-2.8s, because portability is really important for me. And so that's really how I found myself as a photographer, videographer. But yeah, it really comes down to money. But sorry. And I'm seeing a lot.
There's a lot of the good questions coming in there, and shout outs to all of your wisdom being shared here, Robbie. And as you can kind of tell from what he was saying there, sometimes some of the older lenses are ones that we will not be trading in or giving up.
No. 100 STF is mine forever.
The 100 STF is Robbie's forever, documented well on the Mirrorless Mondays. Of which, Nancy, to your question, to learn about more Mirrorless Mondays, just make sure you're on the Adorama social media sites and following them. That's where they're advertised. By registering for this event, I think you're already there and you're good to go. So they will give you alerts of them moving forward. Good answer on the SSD drive there in the chat as well. We got a few more ones here. A few we're putting through.
And thank you, everyone, for your nice comments, too. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining.
We're going to have an overflow post session, I think, on some of these questions. Robbie has done some classes before as well, where we've gone into things. Here. And they all are here. so you
Yeah.
can see. So for some people asking like, hey, usage of ND filters and things of that nature, tips for shooting waterfalls, we have some of those there that could be put in. All filters would really be good. I know we had some questions earlier about, hey, are filters going to diminish anything with like a G Master lens? If you have a good filter on a good lens, you're okay. It's one of those sometimes where if you buy like our 600 f4, you probably want more than a basic filter on there if you were to do anything in that kind of ridiculous ranges. For some of the questions here, as far as wildlife and birding, I'll have a quick answer to it. Robbie can give a little more expertise. How do you get sharp photos at a very high focal length? Kick up that shutter speed. For me, most of the math is at least 100th of a second for every 100 millimeters. Robbie,
Yeah.
you roll with that.
Pretty
Keep
much the
filtering.
same. The faster the better if you have the light available. But it comes down to a balance between knowing your ISOs. So shutter speed is going to be a big one. Real quick too, if Adorama, wink wink, if you could link everyone to your Eventbrite, then everyone could kind of see whenever we have future live streams coming out, because I think we're going to see more of this. It was really great to see everyone's feedback as well, and all the great questions. So yeah, and it is recorded as well, David. So if you guys want to review everything that we've talked about, it will be in the Adorama event YouTube channel, and you could also actually see our previous Mirrorless Mondays as well. So if you are kind of itching to get a little bit more information, then definitely check those out. I think there's a basic to videos in the back and end of that as well. But yeah.
Yeah, we can always have a follow-up on you actually showing all the pictures from your upcoming vacation and how it worked.
I love that.
And the literal shot of your bag, which also from Sonia here, you weren't sure if it's appropriate. I think it is because Robbie's about to go through it as well. The best way to pack your gear for carry-on in air travel, as sometimes they force you to check it.
Oh my God.
This is the fear we all photographers and
I've
content
gone
creators
through
have,
that.
So yeah.
I'm flying economy in group 6, and that happens.
Yeah.
So
it's delicate, Sonia, but Robbie, please.
Yeah. So if you have a company, you can make a photo badge kind of deal to tell them that, hey, I'm a photo editor and I have to bring it with me and check in. And they don't really, as long as it looks official. There's some blogs or some other people who've kind of give a guideline to that, so you could maybe force carry your bags. But I used to carry a Think Tank bag, and the handle broke. Think Tank did an amazing job sending me a replacement handle for it, but that was when the A7 IV and the 7200 G Master 2 just came out. So I was horrified when they told me I had to check it in, and so I carried those two physically, and I left everything else in my soft case bag. So there's sometimes no option for it. So my only resolution to that was carrying a Pelican case and making sure it's a little bit more sturdier and harder to kind of be crunched in. So definitely look at what Adorama has to offer through their website and check out some other gear and accessories for that. But Pelican case was kind of the only thing that I had as an option, and most of the times it was fine. The Think Tank did amazing as well.
Yeah, Tank is amazing, and some of their street rollers that can actually just be you dragging on the wheels through the airport, also a backpack. But always double check with your airline too to see the dimensions of where you're at in your overhead, as well as the space you get in front of you from below that seat that's in the row ahead of you. Because sometimes I know people are like, hey, my bag is going to fit, but you have to realize when you're in an aisle seat, that space is also now less under there in front of you. But I found that in many cases, and this also goes to with the questions about shooting people on the street, if you are polite and you are upfront with people, well, like, hey, I have this nice picture I'd like to take of you, is it okay? You'll get a nod or you'll get the no, and it ain't gonna happen. But it's also the same of, as we're all sitting there, as Robbie said, like group 6, white knuckling it, hoping no one brought an overseas steamer trunk onto there because they're afraid to check their bag. I'm usually racing back there. I've checked my luggage that I don't mind coming down on the cart, but if I see I'm running out of space, it is one of those, I will go up to a flight attendant going, hi, I don't want to be that guy. There's a bunch of stuff here that cannot be gate checked. I'm looking for space. And that's when they will actually try to be like, hey, we're going to find some room. I've had it on a few flights where flight attendants are literally taking people's coats out. Like, you could put this on your lap, you can put this somewhere else, and your bag can find a way there. But also double up on your insurance as well. And that's
It
something
really
as many
depends.
people put. It's a
Yeah,
big depends.
it depends on who is behind that counter, if they're cool or not. Because
Or if
there's
they're
people
on
that are just like,
their
no.
fourth connecting flight and they're like, oh, we don't care anymore. One more flight, we're home.
Yeah,
It is a crapshoot, but you can try to see what you can do on there. Double check on anything you have for coverage. Sony does offer some extended warranties in case it is gate checked. So many ways to protect your gear that can be done.
And Mark, great question on tripods with planes is honestly have a larger check-in bag if it's a really big guy. But I'll typically carry, let's say, a portable, like a travel tripod, and it'll be in the part of my book bag. And that should be okay, or there's room in my book bag to actually put it. Because they can be pretty portable, especially like the Peak Design, or the Me Photo Goes, or the Beef Freeze from Manfrotto as well.
Yeah, it's as you start traveling more, you'll realize
Vanguard.
how much weight you're taking and what's the tripod have to support. So it could become something as big or as little. It's Robbie and I can give suggestions all night. We often do, but it's one of those. Eventually, we can help you narrow it down and find what's the right one for you. And of which we had some other questions in here about customizations. Robbie, I think we have some of those classes up in the channel. I'm not sure. If not, do you still have the R5 hooked up or no? If you could, we'll bring up that customization menu. This will apply for several of your questions. Some of the things you're all going to see in the menu, it won't be reflective on like your A6000, A7 III, A6500s, but the terminology is the same. Because much like we try to give everyone guidance, there is no right or wrong thing for a button. We very much encourage you to make the Sony gear your own and put the features that are going to apply from you where you want to hit them. So, Robbie, if you'd like to give a quick on what you got there.
Sure. So we're here in Operation Customize, and if there's any buttons that you wish would fit you more, because anytime I pick up someone else's Sony camera, it's completely different. So that's one of the greatest things about Sony cameras is every button here, and we could actually see a map in terms of what we can customize, right? From the rear to the control switches over here, and the top buttons here, focus hold, even the side button here, you can make that into something that you prefer. And if you're more comfortable with traditionally changing your aperture from the rear wheel, you could actually do that, right? So for me, ISO, normally in the top right here is exposure compensation. I set that for ISO. And if I do get stuck in ISO auto, then I will set the down button to exposure compensation. That way I can still have that access. It normally is set to nothing, but you can just set that there. And if I am in manual focus, I typically like to be able to punch in. So I'll set that to be over here to the top one. Right now it's in movie shooting because that's a recording button, but I could set that up to be zoom magnification during focus assistant. So I could make that focus magnifier. That way, if I am on manual, let me switch it over to manual. Boop. And so if I hit that button, then I could actually punch in and make sure that I'm incredibly sharp into the claws over there and make sure whatever I wanted is to be in focus. But yeah, that's getting into customization, and it'll also work for videography. And one thing to note as well is that you could also customize your play button. So if you wanted to rate the images that you liked, then you could actually go and do that here as well. So we could go and choose I might have passed it already up.
Yep, there you go.
There you go, rating. And then we could choose the ratings for it, and it'll also show up in your EXIF data. I typically like to go through 3, 1, 3, and 5. 5 for the super keepers that I know for sure that I love. And the 1 star is just a note that I will probably like that image. So even though it'll do something different in photo, I don't have a memory card in here, but if I hit play, it'll do something different. So it'll rate the images as well. So something to keep in mind.
Yep. And we had a few questions about how do you actually manage and know which files to work with. What Robbie just showed on the stars there definitely helps out with your workflow because you have the EXIF data there to be like, hey, these are the ones I saw in the field. These are the ones I want to work on right now. The more you shoot, the more you know what you're looking for. It's easier to start putting these buttons in. And in many cases, plenty of questions here where I think we maybe have our next 3 or 4 Mirrorless Monday topics out of. But I want to thank everyone for bringing all these questions, both before in your registrations as well as in the chat. And always feel free to, just write down and let Adorama know some more things that you'd like to see. Robbie and I value this information highly, and a lot of times that's what leads to some of the photo walks that we do with Adorama as well as online classes. So we try to help out the community as much as we can, both in the greater New York City area where we get to see you all, and of which thank you for those who came and saw us at the firmware day at the store recently. It's always good that people are popping up and they're like, you guys really exist, and we do. We walk among us. And yes, Robbie was there with his 100 STF and an S3 in broad daylight, because
more than likely
it's a more than likely on that. But we want to thank everyone on that, because I know we went over even our hard cap a little bit on time. I know some of the staff at Adorama would love to go home at this point, but I want to thank everyone for joining us, and Robbie for putting together an excellent presentation, sharing your wisdom, your insight, your packing techniques now. So we probably will need some kind of gallery showing now of your vacation, if you will. Travel and landscapes tips and tricks part 2.
There you go. Stay tuned in my social media if you guys want to see what's going on there. I'll try to post as often as I can. But again, thank you, Jason, for joining me and the rest of our imaging specialist team who was able to answer some of the questions in our chat there. And really, everyone, thank you so much for your time, because it is incredibly valuable, and we do appreciate you guys joining us. So we're very much thankful for you being here with us today. It wouldn't happen without you. So have a wonderful day. Kiva actually just told me, like, should we have a class for all 75 lenses? I was like, why not? So if you guys have any questions, leave it in the comments in terms of what classes you'd like to see in the future as well. And again, thank you so much for your time, and have a wonderful day.
Stay safe, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Take advantage of that sweet trade and trade up deal.